Now, why exactly are you in that car?
It's make the shot more smooth. We're getting this this action shot right here. So you're going to be controlling this cart.
So hold on. I'm going to be pushing you in the car.
Yes.
You trust me like that?
No, not really.
Okay.
But you know,
this is a calculated risk?
it's a calculated risk.
Okay.
Sometimes you got to take a leap of faith.
You got to take a leap of faith.
Take a leap of faith.
You got to take a leap of faith.
And that goes to your students. When you take this course, you got to take a leap of faith and trust that this school can get you where you want to go.
Say it again.
Just rewind it and say it.
Look, guys, now I actually want to go over some of the practical applications for some of the tools that we just reviewed. I actually have some of the cutters here, but first we need to learn how to identify cable selection. All right, so look, this yellow cable here is actually a 12 gauge conductor. I can tell how much current can run through this cable based on the color of the outside jacket. So this is like a thermoplastic jacket. It helps the electricians and the building inspectors and the code enforcement officers identify what size cable the electrician ran or installed. So I can tell that this is a 12 gauge cable based on the outside jacket. So yellow means 12-2. This white flat cable, this is actually a 14 gauge cable. It has 3 conductors in it, right? There's a white, black, and a red. This is actually a 14-3. So 14 is the size gauge conductor. Then there are actually 3 current carrying conductors in here. If you look closely, there's a white, a red, and a black. This particular cable is a 10 gauge round cable. This is a 10-3. So this has 3 current carrying conductors, and the gauge wire that's in here, these are 10 gauge copper conductors. All right. So I'm actually going to show you how we strip conductors. So I'm going to pull one out of the jacket here. This is a 12 gauge conductor, and I actually want to show you how we strip some of the insulation off of these conductors. Now, if you notice here on the strippers, there are different numbers. These are wire gauge sizes. And if I want to properly cut the insulation off of here without damaging the conductor, I have to select the proper slot to strip the insulation off of the wire. You drop it on there, pull it up, and the goal is to have a nice, clean strip. So you don't want to put any abrasions in the wire. You got to use just the right amount of pressure. Hold your conductor firmly, pull it right up. You got a perfect termination there. Same thing with the 10 gauge conductors. These strippers, they have a little section for pliers. I can use that to pull a conductor out, select the proper notch for stripping the wire, drop it on there nice and firm, hold your conductor, and I want to actually push the strippers away from the conductor while I'm holding the cable firm, and it comes off nice and clean. And the goal is to be able to do that without damaging the conductor. All right, that's nice and clean. You don't want any abrasions on your conductor. All right. Now, these diagonal cutters I could actually use to trim that conductor any shape, form, or fashion that I'd like. I could also use the lineman to cut that. These are the tools that electricians use to cut wires. So now let's strip a 14 gauge conductor. So I'm going to use my strippers there to pull that out. And this is a 14 gauge wire, so I'm going to select a 14 gauge notch. I'm going to drop it on there, pinch nice and firm, hold the conductor, and I'm going to take my finger and slowly push it off like that. Get a nice clean strip. And let me do that over again for you so you can see it. Nice and clean. As long as you get in the right slot, hold the conductor firmly, push away from the strippers. It should go nice and perfect for you. Okay, I can also use these diagonal cutters to cut the entire cable. Cuts it nice and clean for me. So I can use this to cut single individual conductors or cables. Now obviously the larger the cable, you're going to have to put more force or more torque. But if I need more leverage, I can switch over to the Lineman pliers. And that's going to cut these cables for me nice and clean, nice and easy. And remember, the larger your pliers are, the more torque or pressure you can use to cut the cable. Look, I want to continue to show you all of the practical applications that electricians use for the various size hand tools and cutters. So if you notice, I have 3 staples here, and once in a while an electrician will have to remove or cleanly back out a staple, a cable staple. So look, these diagonal cutters are designed in a way for you to manipulate whatever you're cutting. So that's what that angle's for, so you can get them out nice and clean. They're also good cutters too. I can actually cut that staple out. Now let's say, for example, I have a staple that's in really deep, and I need to get that out. Now I don't want to risk using a screwdriver under there because you could damage your tool. But with diagonal cutters, I can use the curvature of this hand tool to back that staple out. Look how clean that came out. All right. So some of these tools have various uses. So not only are these cutters good for cutting conductors that are insulated, they're also good for cutting bare conductor cables as well. Nice and clean. All right, that's what these cutters are useful for. You can cut entire jackets. Now that was a little tough. So a more efficient way to cut this cable would be to use a larger set of pliers. That was a little easier. So now I want to show you guys how electricians strip conductors to terminate them onto a device. So I'm going to use the little plier function on the strippers here to grab this conductor. This is a 14 gauge conductor, and I'm going to terminate the wire to this 3-way switch here. So I'm going to select a proper notch. I'm at 14. This is a 14 gauge conductor. So I'm just going to strip that off nice and clean. And remember, the goal is to not damage the conductor. Well, if you'll notice on this pair of strippers, there are a few holes. All right. And that actually helps the electrician to make a nice clean hook so we can terminate it to the device. Now, when you are terminating conductors to a switch or to a receptacle or to a device, you want it to go in perfectly. So The strippers actually help us accomplish that task. So if you notice, I've stripped this perfectly. You want to strip the insulation off of the conductor at a distance where when you go onto the screw terminal and I tighten it up, you do not want any of the insulation caught underneath the screw. Now that's perfect. The insulation comes close to the screw, but it's not underneath. Strippers help us achieve that. Now I want to show you guys some practical uses for the 11-in-1 screwdriver that I showed you earlier. So these tips make the life of an electrician more convenient. These special tips reduce the likelihood that you're going to strip a screw. So I'm going to show you how electricians terminate conductors to circuit breakers using the 11-in-1 screwdriver. So I'm going to make sure I have the wire in a proper notch. I'm going to strip that, and it's actually more wire than I need exposed once it terminates to the circuit breaker. So I'm just going to trim it back just a little bit. Now if you notice that there are two different slots in this circuit breaker. There's a square head and there's a slot. So I could actually use two different tools from this 11-in-1 screwdriver to terminate this wire to the circuit breaker. So I'm going to slide that in there like that. And what I am also checking is to make sure that none of this insulation goes underneath that screw, because that could cause a heat point. So let me re-strip that. All right, that's perfect right there. It's not too far out from the edge of the terminal, and the insulation isn't beyond the circuit breaker. So if you notice, there's a square head in there. Look what's on the end of my screwdriver. The 11-in-1, it fits perfectly right inside of that slot, and I can use that to tighten it down to get the right amount of torque. Now let's say I need to back these nails out or remove them. Diagonal cutters help you achieve that because of the curvature in the handle. So look, now I want to show you guys some of the practical application for some of the cutters that I showed you earlier. Now let's use these tools to cut larger conductors. Now this particular cable here, this is a #2 service entrance cable. So this is what residential electricians use to power homes. This cable is rated for 100 amps. So it's aluminum, and it's basically 2 conductors and a ground. So just like the other jackets, this is a thermoplastic jacket. It's good for heat. It's sunlight resistant. These are actually neutral strands. These are wires that I would connect to the neutral bus. Now, when electricians are terminating #2 aluminum conductors to a circuit breaker or to a lug, you can use your Lineman pliers to cut that. Now it's going to take a little leverage to cut that conductor, but look how easy that is. Now that's going to take a little strength. Another option that I can use to cut this number 2 conductor is I can use the high leverage cutters. We like to call them choppers. Look how easy that was. Let me do that again for you. Instant replay. Look how easy that was. I guess I should have said, watch your eyes.
Yeah.
All right, so that's a number 2 cable. Now, to cut this whole cable, I would need a larger tool. So that's going to be on another segment. Now I want to show you how electricians use these cables or cutters to connect wires to a fish tape head. So look, this is armored cable. Now I'm going to use my diagonal cutters to cut this jacket off, but there's actually a tool for it. We'll talk about that in another module. It's actually called a roto split. But I'm going to use my Klein diagonal cutters to cut this cable. This is armored cable, right? This is MC cable, stands for mineral clad. This is actually a 14 gauge cable. The conductors inside of this metallic corrugated jacket are rated for 15 amps. So look, I can actually cut that with my diagonal cutters. Now it takes a little leverage, but I can use them for that. Or I can use my Lineman pliers. Cuts it nice and clean. Now it does require a little leverage. Now I want to actually connect this cable to the fish tape head like I was fishing over a ceiling or through a wall. I want to demonstrate for you guys how electricians connect conductors to a fish tape head. Pull it off nice and clean. Nice and clean. Now really I only need one conductor to connect to that fish head. So I'm going to pull one single conductor out. I'm going to cut the other 2 off. And I can actually put it through just like that. Now I'm ready to pull or fish this cable through walls and ceilings.